So, namaskar friends and welcome once again. We are into lecture number 9. In this particular lecture, I am going to discuss a very pertinent issue concerning modern day communication. The unethical communication is one of the major menaces that the contemporary world is grappling with, and that is why this is very important for us to discuss ethical communication and modes of ethical communication that will really help us overcome this menace of unethical communication. Once again, dear friends, the Indian texts provide us lot of such instances to thoroughly understand what do we really mean by ethical communication. Is it based on some kind of principle, some kind of considerations? Is there any fixed criterion to judge what may be called ethical communication, what might be termed as unethical communication? So, there are a lot of such questions and we will try to find an answer to these questions. And alongside that, this will also make our understanding of the whole communication process very robust and meaningful as well. So, let us begin with the case of Vidura and Śakuni in the epic Mahabharata. All of us know that these are contrasting figures. A powerful opening for our discussion on ethical communication emerges from the epic Mahabharata, as I said, through the contrast between Vidura and Śakuni, two masters of speech who embody opposite moral universe. So, we find that while Vidur always talks from the standpoint of dharma, Śakuni's communication is permeated with an inherent sense of what we can say some kind of deceit or intention to cheat or intention to make benefit out of discussions. Making benefit out of discussion using rightful means is considered a virtue, but then if you want to achieve it by hook or by crook, that may certainly be considered unethical. Śakuni in this case becomes an oily customer, in the sense he manipulates things so that he can ensure victory for his nephew Duryodhana. So, Vidura's communication is grounded in dharma, foresight, and the courage to articulate difficult truth even when it risks displeasing power. So, Vidur, while talking to Dhritarashtra, although he knows that the things that he is talking about will irritate and displease the king, he is never afraid to speak the truth. Śakuni, by contrast, represents communicative brilliance severed from ethics. So, we will come across lot of such people who have this communicative brilliance, but they make use of it for all unethical practices. So, we find that Śakuni manipulates ambiguity, weaponizes suggestion, and converts language into strategy for conflict amplification. Well friends, we always try to find an answer to conflicting situations in some kind of meaningful dialogue, but then Śakuni is a past master in not resolving those conflicts, rather amplifying them. The comparison immediately establishes a crucial theoretical insight. Communication competence and communication ethics are not identical. Friends, some people may be very competent when it comes to communication, but then they may not be ethical in their acharan, behavior or their practice. So, obviously, here is a question whether that kind of communicative brilliance is desirable. So, modern communication ethics distinguishes rhetoric that builds mutual trust from rhetoric that instrumentalizes others. As Elizabeth Lipari argues, communication ethics concerns the creation of the good within human interaction. So, communication that is intended towards establishing good, that is virtuous, that is ethical, that is intended to achieve some kind of kalyan or welfare of the mankind is something that is desirable, but a communication that is devoid of ethics is directed towards some kind of evil is not what is desirable. So, the question arises, what is ethical communication? What kind of communication is called ethical? So, a dharmic definition is tried here. These oft quoted lines say, Satyam briyat, priyam briyat, na briyat, satyam apriyam. That means, speak truth, speak it pleasantly, do not communicate truth in a destructive manner. So, friends, sometimes it sounds very ironical because we always say that truth is very pinching, but then this says that there is, even if you are speaking the truth, you have to speak it in a certain way. Speak the truth, but speak it pleasantly, and do not communicate truth in a destructive manner. So, ethical communication may be defined as the responsible, truthful and context sensitive use of speech, silence, gesture and representation in ways that preserve dignity, clarity and relational trust. So, it is not that we can communicate in any way simply because we have communicative brilliance. Alongside that communicative brilliance, our knowledge of the world, our sensitivity, our situational awareness, they are also very, very important. In the earlier discussions also, friends, we have seen that it is not the written language alone that makes the meaning, but how this written language is conveyed orally. And this manner of communicating it orally makes all the difference in the perception of the meaning. So, Indian texts rarely treat speech as neutral. Vak, speech, is morally charged because words shape reality, relationships and actions. So, ethics lies not only in factual correction or correctness, but also in delivery, timing and receivability. So, it is not important that you are speaking the truth, but it is also important how that truth is delivered, taking into account the manahistiti, the mental state of the receiver, the appropriation of time, whether that matter or that fact is delivered at the right moment. Contemporary communication scholars would call this a balance of truthfulness, empathy and audience ethics. So, friends, when we talk about communication, we always say that communication is not independent of its impact on the people we are communicating with, and that is why it is very important on our part to take full care of the people we are communicating with. We need to take care of their sentiment, their expectations, their emotions, and that will make us good communicators. So, ethical communication therefore includes honesty, accountability, non-harm and the responsibility to communicate in forms that preserve dialogue rather than produce unnecessary injury. Many a time, friends, we speak the truth, but then it is so pinching that it causes harm, emotional hurt to other person. So, we need to understand that we have to be emotionally intelligent and ethically restrained in communicating our ideas. There are 5 components, we call them satya, hita, priya, kāla and maryādā. So, Indian texts allow us to theorize ethical communication through these 5 interdependent components. Satya, what is that? Truthfulness. What to communicate? Whatever is truthful or true. What considerations have to be there? It has to be for the benefit of others, hita, there. So, intent should be beneficial, and again how it has to be communicated? The tone has to be priya, that is appropriate and compassionate. What is this kāla gyan? Kāla gyan is our understanding of the right and proper timing of our message. So, what to speak, where to speak, when to speak, that makes lot of difference in communication. If you make inappropriate remark out of context, you will be in for some kind of trouble. But if you make a remark in proper context at the proper time, obviously respecting your maryādā. What is that maryādā? Maryādā is the ethical boundary and contextual propriety. So, if we plan our communication around these 5 components, like we speak the truth that is beneficial to others, and we speak it in a pleasant way, and again we time it to perfection and speak at the appropriate time and take care of our maryādā, like our contextual propriety or ethical boundaries, obviously our communication will be not only ethical, but also very effective. So, these are not isolated virtues, but relational principles that acquire meaning through their balance with one another. So, we need to understand how to balance all these 5 components in order to deliver ethical communication. The brilliance of this model lies in its understanding of communication not merely as transmission of information, but as relational action embedded in consequence, responsibility and social harmony. So, friends, while communicating with people, we also have to be sensitive about relations that we enjoy with them, about the consequences that may have to be suffered as a result of a bad communication or a communication that is not desirable. We have to take full responsibility while communicating to ensure that our communication creates social harmony rather than becoming disruptive. So, in this sense, Indian traditions anticipate contemporary discourse ethics by foregrounding intentionality, affect, timing and accountability. Even now, when we talk about the successful communication, effective communication, we always talk about intentionality. What is our intention and how best that is communicated? Affect, what kind of experience and impact it creates, timing of our communication, and again accountability, sense of responsibility. So, communication has to be sensible, it has to be responsible. So, in leadership and organizational settings, these 5 principles map directly onto practices such as performance reviews, crisis messaging, mentorship, conflict resolution and diplomatic negotiation. So, if you look at all these aspects, the components of satya, hita, priya, kāla and maryādā, you will find their modern equivalents in performance reviews, crisis messaging, mentorship, conflict resolution and diplomatic negotiation. Let us take some examples of ethical communication. One of the examples that has oft been referred to is that of Hanuman and the Dut tradition. The messenger as ethical diplomat. All of us know about the story of Ramayana, where Lord Hanuman has been entrusted with the responsibility to go and deliver the message of Lord Rāma to Rāvan, and he goes to Lanka, and there he finds Mata Sita. Sita is very dispensive, she is very sad, sitting in Tapovan surrounded by all strangers with nothing in sight. She does not know how would she communicate her plight to Lord Rāma and how Lord Rāma will reach that fortress of Lanka. And then Hanuman reaches there. The Duta or the messenger tradition in Indian epics reaches one of its finest expressions in this scene, where Hanuman, whose role in the Ramayana offers an extraordinary model of diplomatic, ethical and emotionally intelligent communication. What does Hanuman do? Everybody knows. He was capable of killing and destroying Lanka, but he does not do that. He follows a certain ethics, being a messenger. He exemplifies the ideal messenger who combines truth, tact, timing and empathy. When he approaches Sita in Ashok Van, he does not begin with an overwhelming flood of information. Instead, he first establishes credibility, emotional safety and symbolic trust through the presentation of Rama's ring, a carefully chosen sign that makes the message psychologically receivable. So, he does not start telling Sita who he is, who has sent him, how does he know Sita and what purpose has brought him to Lanka. Rather, he presents her with Rama's ring, and immediately looking at the ring, Sita believes that somebody closer to Lord Rama has come there, because she knows that such a ring cannot be created through any kind of illusion. Recent scholarship on Hanuman's communication interprets this through the lens of sahridayata. What is that? The shared hearted resonance between communicator and recipient. As communicator, if you can establish that kind of relationship and win the trust of your other party, your communication will always be received properly. So, successful communication depends on empathetic attunement rather than mere verbal transfer. Just speaking without a stop is not communication. Earlier also we have talked about silence, we have talked about realizing the truth. Fine. Here again no words exchanged, but through this symbolic gesture Hanuman establishes a communication which is based on sahridayata, that is shared hearted resonance. It is a model for modern crisis communication, counseling, therapeutic dialogue, leadership messaging and diplomatic negotiation as well. Wherever the two communicating parties are able to establish any kind of rapport or trust, they will be able to communicate meaningfully. Unless trust is built, communication will not be possible. Another case may be that of Narada Muni, the omnipresent in Indian literature. He is considered to be one of the biggest communication catalysts. Narada Muni is one of the most sophisticated communicators in Indian narrative traditions, because he does not merely transmit information, he reveals latent truth by bringing submerged tensions into speech. In this sense, his speech is not passive reporting, but an active ethical disclosure that forces recognition, reflection and action. Importantly, what makes his communication philosophically rich is that it may initially appear disruptive, even provocative at times, yet it is ethically catalytic rather than merely sensational. So, there is a definite intentionality. His intentions have never been disruptive. Rather, he tries to initiate a process so that ethical correction may be made. His genius lies in understanding that unresolved tensions do not disappear through silence, they intensify until truth gives them form. This makes him a profound model of strategic disclosure, moral courage and communicative intervention. It can be seen as pre-modern archetype for the truth teller or investigative journalist, whistleblower, institutional auditor and ethical advisor. So, all these people do the course correction of sorts, and Narada Muni is one of the best examples of it. Ethical communication is not always about comfort, harmony or reassurance. At critical moments, it requires the courage to speak the difficult truth that initiates transformation. So, having emphasized on satyam briyat, priyam briyat, I must tell you that the most challenging job is to speak the difficult truth, and there are moments when you are bound to do that rather than going dilly dally. Another example is again from the epic Mahabharata. Yudhishthir, all of us know, is one of the most important characters, kind of dharmadhikari, somebody who believes in dharma. His communicative dilemmas repeatedly show that truthfulness is rarely simple, mechanical or free from consequence. If you want to stick to truth, and all of us know Yudhishthir is known for that, he never tells a lie. But then how difficult it is for him to speak the truth when he is expected strategically to propagate a lie. His most famous crisis, the Aswathama hatah, Aswathama mara gaya. He utters these words, rather he is made to utter these words in front of Dronacharya to make him weak, because it is the name of his son, and the moment the father comes to know about the killing of his son, certainly he will not be in any position to fight, and then they can easily defeat Kauravas. So, what happens in this episode, he is technically true, because what he speaks later, Aswathama mara gaya, nariya kunjar, but then in the tumultuous noise of the war, and again because of the sudden shock, Dronacharya is not able to hear it properly, and he presumes that Yudhishthir, who has never told a lie in his life, is speaking the truth, and his son Aswathama has been killed. Well, it is used, this statement is used strategically under the compulsion of war. It reveals how truth, duty, intention and consequence can collide within a single utterance. Yudhishthir will certainly find it very difficult to utter something that is not true or intended. So, what makes Yudhishthir philosophically significant is that he transforms speech into a site of dharma sankat, a crisis where every available choice carries moral residue. His dilemmas force us to ask whether ethical communication should be judged by rule based fidelity to truth, satya, or by context sensitive responsibility to larger outcomes. Well, friends, our concept of dharma is different from law. It does not follow a definite deterministic standpoint all the time, rather it is situational, it is context sensitive. So, wherever you need to speak something that is intended for larger good or establishment of dharma, then speaking a different kind of truth is also allowed. That is why intentionality comes into focus once again. Yudhishthira reminds us that the burden of truthful speech lies not only in speaking facts, but in bearing responsibility for what those facts do in the world. Fine. So, there may be moments in our professional life that may be moments of crisis, but then we need to decide that we should work for the collective good and should act responsibly rather than siding with someone because that someone is right, but situationally that may be counterproductive for many more people. Again, let us take the case of Kṛṣṇa, one of the epitomes of ethical communication and ethical persuasion. Kṛṣṇa in the Bhagavad Gita offers perhaps the most sophisticated model of ethical leadership communication through dialogue. The setting itself is crucial. Communication begins not in certainty but in crisis. We have earlier also talked about this crisis situation where Arjun has refused to fight, and that is why Kṛṣṇa has to address his dilemma. So, instead of issuing commands, Kṛṣṇa could have told him, "Oh Arjun, take your bows and arrows and fight, this is what you are here for," but he does not do that. What does he do? He first allows the crisis to be fully verbalized. Well, friends, if you are a leader or let us say the highest officer of your office and your subordinate comes with some problem, if you allow that subordinate to verbalize or narrate his problem, probably half of the matter will be shorted there, because after listening to him you will be in a better position to understand his situation. And again, since you have listened to him, he is also unburdened by all his complaints that he had in his mind and is better prepared to respond to whatever you suggest. So, Kṛṣṇa here does not pass orders to Arjun to fight, rather he allows the crisis to be fully verbalized first. He asks Arjun, "What is your problem? What are your feelings? What are your concerns? What is the dilemma?" And this establishes an ethics of communication rooted in listening before intervention. Many a time, friends, we do not allow the other person to speak and we derive conclusions just based on our own preconceptions and past judgment. As a good communicator, always make it a habit to listen to people fully before giving your solutions or intervening. What makes Kṛṣṇa's communication ethically exemplary is that it is a non-coercive persuasion. Now, this is also an art. How can you persuade people to do something without really using any kind of coercive force? Iti te jnanam makhyatam guhyad guhyataram maya bimrisayit tad sesena yathekshasi tatha kuru. That means reflect fully upon what has been said and then act as you choose. Do not be in a hurry. So, Krishna's leadership communication is therefore not authoritarian, it is transformative dialogue that restores autonomy, and there are a lot of learnings for modern day leaders. The leader's role is not to impose a decision, but to create the conditions in which the other person can arrive at ethically grounded action. Well, think of the coaches in cricket. I have heard many of them during their interviews with broadcasters. They exactly try to know what kind of role do they play, and they say that we never try to change the style of a player or a natural instinct of a player. We just facilitate them so that they can realize their strengths and weaknesses fully and act responsibly. That is it. That is what Lord Krishna also does. So, trust in leadership is not created by eloquence alone. You may be a good speaker, but that does not mean you can create trust. It is sustained by the visible alignment of vani, that is speech, bhava, that is intent, and achar or acharan, that is action. So, we always talk about bringing a fine coordination between your oral communication, your body language, and your intentions, cognition. So, bani, bhava and acharan, they all have to combine to make ethical communication happen. In the Mahabharata, figures such as Yudhishthir, Vidura and Kṛṣṇa command trust not because they are always agreeable, but because their words are dependable. We believe that these people will speak the truth, they will speak for dharma. Fine. Their speech carries weight because it is ethically anchored in satya, that is truth, and dharma, that is righteousness. By contrast, the Kaurava code demonstrates the opposite principle. When language becomes manipulative, institutions decay from within. Duryodhana's promises are strategic rather than sincere. Śakuni weaponizes speech through deception. Dhritarashtra's silence and evasive language weaken the moral authority of the throne. So, we can find out the contrast between the two modes of communication, one intended to be ethical, the other one otherwise. For contemporary leadership, this translates into a profound principle: promises must be actionable, vision must match organizational behavior, public statements must reflect real policy, feedback must align with actual support systems. Many a time, friends, we are not happy with a particular organization simply because what they promise is not what is delivered. They try to conceal more than they reveal about themselves, and when their deceit is found out, we are very unhappy with them, and that also tarnishes their image forever. Again, let us talk about Rāma and public ethical communication, trust and legitimacy. In Ramayana, Ram's speech is inseparable from maryādā. We talked about situational appropriateness, we talked about the boundaries, ethical boundaries, the discipline of role, relational propriety and public responsibility. His communication repeatedly demonstrates that leaders must speak in ways that preserve institutional trust, symbolic order and public faith. Whether addressing Dasharatha, Lakshmana, Bharat, Sita or the citizens of Ayodhya, his words are measured, restrained and aligned with role dharma. So, we never find him indulging in any kind of cheap, undignified talk. He is always dignified, disciplined in the selection of his words, in his tone. Even in emotionally charged situations, he does not allow speech to become impulsive. We find, contrary to Ram, Lakshman always becomes very fiery and impulsive, but Ram always remains calm. So, that is very important. His decisions are never merely personal, they are mediated by how the leader is understood by the polity. This is especially important in discussing kingship, governance and institutional ethics. His speech reflects clarity of duty and makes him an ideal example of composer under moral pressure. So, we can learn ethical communication from such great figures. In workplace and organizational settings, performance feedback, appraisal discussions, conflict conversations and mentoring relationships all demand the delicate balance of satya and hit, truthfulness joined with the intention of growth and well-being. Ethical workplace communication therefore requires the ability to speak honestly while remaining constructive, respectful and future oriented. There are moments, friends, when some burdensome or worrisome news has to be shared with your employees, but in the best interest of the organization that has to be done, it is a compulsion. If that is communicated in the right manner to your employees, they are always ready to support you, to stand by you. Seen through the lens of dharma, feedback is not simply evaluative speech, but a responsibility toward the flourishing of the other person and the integrity of the institution. The goal is correction without humiliation. So, many a time some of your colleagues might not be performing as per your expectation or the organizational expectation. That does not mean you should call them and humiliate them in front of everybody. Rather, you should call them in private, talk to them, in the intimacy of friendship and try to make them understand that these are some of the concerns that need your attention. Clarity without aggression and accountability without fear, they are what make your communication top class. So, this makes mentoring and appraisal conversations deeply ethical acts where the communicator must consider not only the factual content of the message, but also its tone, timing, psychological safety and long term consequences. In the digital age, communication has acquired unprecedented speed, reach and permanence, making ethical responsibility more urgent than ever. The fundamental challenge lies in the fact that technology has amplified the power of speech without proportionately deepening the ethics of speech. So, one of the biggest challenges that we are facing at the moment, friends, the problem of post truth. We are living in an era where rumors are doing the round and it is so difficult to really find out truth from untruth. Messages circulate instantly across platforms, often privileging reaction over reflection. Many a time we click the like or unlike button even without looking at the content, where it is expected of us that we should go through the content, judge whether it deserves a like or dislike. Virality over verification and visibility over responsibility. This creates serious ethical challenges such as misinformation, emotional polarization, privacy violations, cyber harassment, deep fakes and algorithmic bias, all of which we can trust in public discourse and institutional communication. So, contemporary research on digital media ethics highlights how falsehood, sensationalism and AI generated content can rapidly distort public understanding when fact checking and accountability mechanisms remain weak. A second major challenge is the collapse of tone, context and boundaries in digital spaces. Unlike face to face communication, online interaction often removes gestures, voice and emotional nuance, making even well meaning speech appear harsh, offensive and manipulative. At the same time, the blurred line between personal and professional identities creates new dilemmas of maryādā, ethical limits, confidentiality and role sensitive speech. Privacy concerns, data extraction, surveillance and algorithmic amplification, they further complicate the ethics of digital communication by turning users into both communicators and commodities. So, ethical communication in the digital age requires not only better technology, but better communicative character, slowness before posting, accountability after sharing, the responsibility toward the emotional and social consequences of speech. Many a time friends, we press the reply all button without knowing that the nature of information to be shared is confidential and it is not intended to be made public to all the people, and that creates lot of problem. In this sense, the future of digital communication depends on transforming connectivity into ethical stewardship, where truth, dignity and trust remain central despite technological acceleration. So, friends, this is all about ethical communication. These are works that have been used in understanding this. Thank you very much for your kind attention once again. Please join me for the next class.